Hello and welcome to Rumpled Trenchcoat, a Columbo podcast for all your Columbo needs. I'm Rich Nocella and I'm here with my sister.
Adrienne Nocella.
And if I know me, you've probably listened to a doorbell with an alarm going off for about 15 seconds before starting this episode.
Yeah.
But this episode is, of course, Lady in Waiting, 1971, starring Susan Clark as Beth Chadwick, Richard Anderson as the victim Bryce Chadwick, Leslie Nielsen as Peter Hamilton, her fiancé, and Enrico, a yapping terrier who is still the most likable member of the Chadwick family.
Yeah, this entire episode, I mean, of course we're going to get into it because that's why we're here, but this entire episode could be summed up by just, make sure you give your sister or daughter a hug once in a while. That's really what this episode's all about. Just make sure you reach out and give them a hug. Maybe say, atta boy, atta girl, you're doing a good job.
This whole thing could have been avoided. Let's just get started then. The episode starts for some reason with a sweeping aerial view of LA at night. And I don't know if that's just to say, hey, we don't want anything too interesting while we show Stephen Baccio's name on the screen. Or if it's just to say, this is LA at night and here is yet another story in the naked city, except that was a New York thing.
Oh.
But then it really gets to the inside of the bedroom where Susan is sneaking into her brother Bryce's room to steal a key from his keychain while he sleeps in a four-poster bed.
Yes.
This is meant to immediately, because they show you the house, it is a mansion, so it's not odd that they're living together. This is clearly the family house.
Right.
And so she takes a key off the key ring. Right off the bat, I'm going to say, I remember those terrible key rings. She has to slide and unhook and move a chain around. It's like really, really awkward for her to get that key off and then to put it back together again. And I remember those things. I'm so glad we don't have those kinds of keychains anymore. It's just awful.
It's like a puzzle in and of itself. It's like a Rubik's Cube of a keychain. And maybe it was just to prevent people from stealing your keys?
I'm thinking it was probably because it was more designed from the jewelry, because that was a similar necklace clasp.
That was a fancy key. I did notice that the keychain was very fancy. It sort of looked like it was like a Tiffany keychain.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So right off the bat, it's supposed to be smooth, but you could see even with editing and everything, she still has a hard time getting the key off and putting it back on.
Yes.
Now, we don't know why she's doing this, but we find out right away, because the next scene is her sitting on a veranda. So whenever you have a veranda, you've got wealthy people. That's yet another shortcut to this is a wealthy family. Eating breakfast outside, you're a wealthy person.
Yes.
If you have eating dinner outside's a picnic, but having breakfast outside, you're wealthy, especially if you have a butler pouring you coffee.
Yeah, and the orange juice was like in a crystal chalice.
Yes.
So
for them to both do what they always do on TV, which is to take one sip and then move on, with their day.
Yeah, right.
But I did want to say they're establishing she's sitting there at the table. She's holding up a newspaper in front of her face, not in a way that somebody reading a newspaper would, but very petulantly to say to us, I'm annoyed with this guy who's sitting down at the table, who we then find out is her brother. She's also holding it in a way that I think is physically impossible, because she's holding one end of a very elongated newspaper and drinking with her other hand, but that paper didn't falter or flap or anything. So I don't know if it was just really old, newspapers were probably a lot more sturdy than the garbage now. But
maybe that's their rich person newspaper and it's printed on linen. So that's why it's sturdy. They could just hold it right up like that. We don't get newspapers like that, Rich.
No, we don't. And when we do, they don't have full page advertisings for electric calculator on them. Which shows about a 3-foot tall calculator for $169 in 1971.
Right.
And they liked it so much they repeated that ad later on in the episode. So right off the bat, we're getting a nice little taste of 70s decadence. Breakfast on the veranda with a butler, calculators that would probably, that would probably be like $800 in today's dollars. I'm not sure. So the brother sits down and they start to talk. And this is where we find out where this whole problem is. She's acting kind of childlike behind the paper. And you find out it's because she's been kind of infantilized by her family. What really comes out in the conversation is that her whole life, their father really controlled her life, wouldn't let her date who he felt was inappropriate, wouldn't let her really do anything. He died, and now her brother is doing the exact same thing.
Right.
And most importantly, she's now, I mean, I think she's supposed to be in her 30s, but maybe early 40s. I mean, she's certainly old enough to date whoever she wants.
Yeah. At one point in the episode, they have the cop call over the radio or whatever, the CB, and they talk about how there's a 45-year-old woman in the household and a 46-year-old victim in the household.
Oh, you know what? I missed that.
So I think that she's supposed to be 45. However, the actress playing Beth is in her late 20s.
Well, I was thinking around the eyes, you could see maybe that she was really a little bit older. But that's good. I actually did miss that. So that makes sense then.
So Susan Clark, she's supposed to be 45.
Okay. Well, that makes it even worse that here she is now, this 45-year-old woman being told by her 46-year-old brother that he does not approve of the man she's dating right now, because even though he's a hard-working lawyer who's really good at the job in their family's advertisement business, her brother Bryce feels that the fiancé Peter Hamilton, played by Leslie Nielsen, is just a fortune hunter.
Which is my all-time favorite sort of gender flip of a terrible phrase. So, why can't he just be a gold digger? So gold diggers are for ladies, but if you're a man, it somehow sounds like very adventurous. It's like
a fortune hunter.
A fortune hunter, and it's like he's just a gold digger.
Yeah.
I do at one point want to talk about their relationship for sure.
Oh yes. Oh no, we're getting there.
Okay. Getting there. Because I'd like your thoughts on whether you think he's actually a fortune hunter or not.
I got to tell you, I think it'll be an interesting conversation.
Okay.
So her brother Bryce not only disapproves of Peter, but disapproves to the point where he sent Peter a letter saying, "Stop dating my sister or you're fired."
Yeah. It's bad.
Yeah, it was
That's really meddling.
Really, I mean, it's intrusive as he can possibly be. Yeah. And he just told her now, took a sip of coffee and got up and left from the table. And she was like, wait, what do you mean measures have been taken? What do you mean? What are you talking about? And that's when she finds out that, he said, "Stop dating my sister or you're fired." And at that point, she had nothing to do with the business. Mm-hmm. I get it. She's part of a wealthy family. He's working for that wealthy family. It's not like Leslie Nielsen was sleeping his way up to the top.
Right. She's on the board, but I think it's just a position. I think it's a name only.
They literally say as a figurehead. They use the phrase as a figurehead only.
Probably just to keep an equal share in the family.
Right, and to keep it a family business.
And they really do treat, at least Bryce really is very dismissive. He really treats her like she's a teenager, which I guess it's sort of like that self-fulfilling prophecy, because it's like, if you expect nothing from her, she may give you nothing.
Right.
So she's sitting there sort of pouting and reading a newspaper and sort of, like you said earlier, acting like a petulant child.
Yeah,
she is.
She's literally.
But that's all they expect of her. That's maybe all they let her be.
Well, I think that's what we're supposed to think as we go through the episode. We see they treated her like one because that's how they saw her. Mm-hmm. They never really gave her a chance to be anything but that.
Right.
And I can only imagine that when her father died, she probably thought, "Oh, thank God, I'm finally out from under his thumb." Right. And then all of a sudden her older brother is now doing the exact same thing. I mean, that was part of the avoidable tragedy here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you see her as he leaves, she takes the key that she stole from him out of her pocket and kind of taps it against her lips. So clearly we know there's a plan involved. We just don't quite know what it is. And I think this was the breaking point, which is like, I have this plan, but I may not necessarily carry it out. And then all of a sudden he said, "I'm now chasing your boyfriend away," basically.
Oh, yeah. He sent him like a notarized letter saying that, you have to break up with my sister or you're going to lose your career, which is just, again, these are people in their 40s. This is a little preposterous.
That's the part that's so funny, and I guess we'll eventually get to it. But, I mean, Leslie Nielsen clearly looked like he was in his 50s to be a fortune hunter. I know it's supposed to be this dashing debonair, but this probably should have been the episode where they had Martin Sheen play the part of the young guy, and then you could wonder, gee, what was he really after? Leslie Nielsen. I mean, they look like they could have just been dating. They were a perfectly compatible couple, at least surface wise.
They looked like they got along just fine. So I don't really know what the issue is. Also, Rich, maybe I'm gonna need to see your keychain later. I didn't like how you talked to me earlier. So
fair enough.
Just sidebar.
Fair enough. I could never get that damn thing off. At this point, people kind of go about and do their day, and now it's nighttime, and she is curled up in bed with a box full of chocolates.
Oh man, talk about making her sound like a little teenager again, by the way, because she actually has this like statue. I don't know if it's of like baby Huey, but like she has this little statue on her bedside, an angel.
It's an angel, which was, I'm sure, on purpose. It was a cherubic angel, yes.
So she's got that little cherub angel statue. She's like all bundled up with like a lace collar all the way up, like above her. It's like above her chin. I mean, not quite, but there is nothing. She is in a full-on like flannel nightgown with a robe, and she's just very, very, very like what you would put your child to bed in, basically. She's a little girl. She's a little 45-year-old girl.
She's a little 45-year-old girl with a whole box of chocolates in the bed.
Yep.
Not to harp on continuity, but there's a lot of different changes in the degree she's eating those chocolates. But and of course, the old revolver in the nightstand. Yeah. She pulls that out. And this gigantic push-button alarm system with a great big cord on it. Yeah.
Don't you just miss buttons, period?
Yes.
Like, I miss buttons. I like a keyboard that has, like, a little clack to it. Like, I don't like this, like, smooth, my nails get in the way. I like my phone to have a button. I miss buttons. Yeah. Very much.
It's odd, but yes, I absolutely do. To get that tactile, feedback.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it reminds me of the old TV remotes we used to have when we were kids that would, or the VCR one, where it would be this gigantic thing. Yeah. And then it would be this like 8-foot thick cord that would just run to the TV.
Don't even get me started on a dial. I can live without a dial, but the button I miss. And then if you had I happen to have a very wealthy friend growing up, so she had a wireless remote like a full decade before everybody else, but it was a full on like click, 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 click. Yes. It was like light switches. It was like a series of light switches on a big toaster, which was the remote. And every button you press, it was like click, 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 click.
Yeah, no, you'd get that nice little feedback, that tactile feedback. So she's in bed, and this is very interesting because I don't think they've ever done this before or since. I know they didn't do it before.
Yes.
But she now, it's like the movie Unfaithfully Yours, where she now has a fantasy about how the plan is supposed to go. Doobly 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 sound,
and
like
you
have
that wavy foggy film.
So the plan is pretty simple. She swapped light bulbs with a dead bulb on the front patio. Mm-hmm. She already took his key. So the idea is he was going to come home. Yes. It was going to be dark. So he couldn't see his key ring and realized he didn't have a key.
Right.
He was going to try the door. It was the butler and maid's night out.
Correct.
So he was going to have no choice but to come round to her window, which is also on the ground floor right by the front door. And she has French doors, I should say, not really window.
She has French doors. And honestly, this entire murder plot is a reason why I get nervous in real life about French doors. No, I'm serious. If you're on the ground floor and you're right, he was going to come around to her side door and come in.
Right. He was basically going to knock on the door to say, hey, could you let me in?
Right.
And she was going to say, I'm already in bed. Just come on in. And said she had unlocked the door. She had the alarm set so that if the door is opened, it would go off.
Yes.
And she was going to shoot him and pretend that she thought he was a burglar coming into her room. She was just going to even break the window to make it look like the brother got frustrated and broke the window and set off the alarm, and that scared her, and that was going to be it. And then you hear the voiceover of, and it's kind of funny because it was the voices of the actual detectives who do later question her, like she had no way of knowing that, but that was just a little shortcut, just saying, oh, I guess I thought he was a burglar. Oh well. no problem there.
So let me just get it. So the murder. So the scene we're talking about right now is her fantasizing about
Yes.
this really very simple plan
Yes.
to murder her brother, which this is a realistic plan, right?
Yes.
This could and should work.
Absolutely.
She's not training dogs. There's
Right.
no robot programming. You know what I mean? Like, I love those episodes, but this is a very simple, realistic plan. He tries to come home, the light's out, he can't find his key, he walks around to the side of the house.
Sets off the alarm, she shoots.
Sets off the alarm, she shoots him. Easy peasy. Everyone would understand why she would do so, and that's it. That's the murder plan, and it's a very simple. I think it's actually a really good plan.
It's one of the more clever because it is realistic.
It's plausible.
Completely
it's plausible.
Definitely plausible. So that's the dream, and then she snaps out of the dream.
Yeah, so she's fantasizing about killing her brother.
That's right. Very gleefully, by the way, while eating chocolates.
I mean, but wouldn't you? I mean, what a jerk. Bryce is kind of the worst. I mean.
Well, again, family issues. Clearly, the father, who we never see because he dies before this all begins, had plenty of issues, and the mother had plenty of her own, who we do get to meet.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why the dog is still the
hero,
most likable, and he's just a yappy little pain in the neck.
Yeah.
But it's all a very plausible plan.
Yeah.
Easy to believe. So this is where the Columbo comes in, which makes it such a great episode, even though it is a simplistic episode.
It's a good episode.
Her very simple plan is completely undone because she didn't know that he had a spare key on the front porch.
Right.
So the scenario instead went, he gets home, it's dark, he can't see his keys, he doesn't have the key on his chain, but instead he dips into a flower pot and pulls out a spare key. Now, we don't see that. We find that out later.
Right.
What we see instead is her very gleefully hearing him come home, trying to get in the front door, and her hugging a four-poster bed.
Yeah.
Holding her gun out, waiting for him to basically say, come on in and get murdered.
Yeah.
And instead, he shows up through her bedroom door.
And he startles her.
He startles her.
And therefore, he startles us as the audience, because we're expecting him to come walking in through those French doors.
We were expecting him to at least knock on the door and to say, hey, I'm here. And instead, he just, and by the way, he does just open her door. He doesn't knock on it.
This is a completely unsympathetic victim. He is the worst.
He really is pretty terrible. Luckily, we don't have a victim sympathy meter, but
no. Oh yeah, that's a good point.
He's pretty bad. Maybe we should. I don't know. But
we'll think about it.
The first thing he does, instead of saying, "Oh, sorry, I startled you awake," he just bursts into her room and says, "Hey, you know what's funny? I don't have my key. And by the way, why didn't you answer the door? I was ringing the bell and knocking." So he was scolding her for not getting out of bed to open the door for him. And at that point, she just shoots him 3 times in the chest.
I mean, happily.
Yeah.
I would too.
Yeah, I mean, but now this is back to nice Columbo again, because we had this nice simple plan, and now it might as well have been unpremeditated, because now she's got to scramble to clean up the scene.
She's cleaning up the scene. I gotta tell you, good improvisation by Beth. She does a very tidy job, and I think in part of it is because her plan is so simple or realistic. It's actually pretty easy to just, again, she doesn't have to like reset much of anything. She's just got to move some items around.
Basically, just got to drag his body over to the French doors.
Yep.
And the suitcase over to the French doors and set off the alarm.
That's it.
And that's it. And she did that, and she did it well. So here's the issue, because we have to back up just a second.
Sure.
Her boyfriend, Peter, was out of state for business. Right. Came back home, and that's when he found the letter from Bryce saying, "Stop dating my sister or you're fired." And he's like, "Well, look, I'm 55 years old. I don't need to take this." And he drives out to her place. So he actually arrives while she's shooting her brother. So he hears her brother get shot. He hears the alarm go off. And he runs. He runs like a maniac to get to the house to see if she's okay.
Because this is Leslie Nielsen
playing
it straight. Now, this is definitely before my favorite role of his, which is Creepshow.
Yes.
This is definitely before all the Naked Gun movies.
Yeah, it was about 8.5 years before Airplane.
Oh, that's what I wanted to ask you. So it's before Airplane. What was that show? Police Squad?
Police Squad. That the Naked Gun series was from the files of Police Squad.
Yes.
So which was a double joke because nobody saw Police Squad except you and me. So they were referencing a show that nobody saw.
He just is a straight actor at this point
He's
in his
still
career.
Forbidden Planet Leslie Nielsen. He's still just a straight actor playing a straight role. And it's funny because you can still see the difference. You want to think it's funny, but he is still playing it straight. And even in all the comedies he was in, where he was playing it almost straight, you can really see the subtle difference in why that was funny versus him being completely straight in this. There was really nothing unusual about his performance.
He's got no patience for anything.
Right.
He's got no patience for Bryce.
Right.
And he races over there and he's going to make sure that Beth's okay. And then I tried to watch it a few times. I can't tell because I love a stunt double, right? Yeah. I love a stunt double. Yeah. So I can't tell. I think Leslie Nielsen actually climbed that gate.
I think he did.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't. Now I know again in Police Squad, whenever they have a stunt double, they purposely go for the whitest possible wig, so that everybody knows that it's absolutely not him. But I think he did scale that. It wasn't a huge fence to scale, but he did scale it. I believe he did. I mean, I don't know.
Well, I watched it a few times. I think he did. And what happened was you're exactly right. So he races over there to make sure to actually have it out with Bryce about like, what are you doing? We're all middle-aged people. What's happening here? I'm also wealthy independently of this family. And I'm successful in my career here. What is the actual problem? I'm a lawyer.
I'm a lawyer before joining your advertising firm.
And I'm good at it. And so he races over there and their house is so fancy that it is gated. So he hears the shot and then he races there to make sure she's okay and he scales the big gate, which is what we're talking about, which I just think it's really funny because he's like, there's a couple scenes of him booking down that driveway. He is running.
He's flying because of course he thinks he's trying to save her. And as an audience, we're like, oh man, if you get there too soon, you're not going to like what you see, which is her dragging his body. So he then rings the bell while the alarm is still going, and that's the sound you most likely, if I know me, heard at the beginning of this episode.
Oh my God, this is
that rich person's doorbell.
It's the rich person's doorbell. The soundscape of this episode is super irritating because that alarm is like an old school. They had this in my high school where if you need to change classes, it was a true bell.
It was a literal bell.
An alarm bell.
Clapper.
Exactly. So it was it was like that sound.
Yeah, that old firehouse bell.
The firehouse bell, yes. So it's that continuously plus that doorbell ringing, much to her horror because now she's in the middle of covering up a pretty good plan.
Yes.
But she's moving Bryce's body. She's got to figure out the key situation because now he has a spare key that she was just newly made aware of.
That's right.
He's got a briefcase. He's got a newspaper. He's got a whole bunch of sort of articles that she's got to move around to make it look like he was breaking in through her side door.
Right, except...
Or entering her side door, I should say.
Entering her side door. No, she still wanted to make it look like he broke in, and that's what set off the alarm. So that's why she took his briefcase and still broke the pane out of the window. So because that's what was supposed to set off the alarm, and that was supposed to get her awake and startled. And she was groggy because she pretended to take a sleeping pill. She had it all set.
It was a good plan.
Yes, but now the other mistake that was made was he walked into the house with his briefcase and newspaper, and she ran back and grabbed the briefcase and put it by his body, which she dragged by her French doors, but she did not get the newspaper.
Correct.
And that newspaper was left there.
Yes.
She, again, had the presence of mind to answer the front door to Leslie Nielsen, who rushed in. I like how we're calling him that and not even bothering with Peter Hamilton.
His name is Peter. Peter Hamilton.
But, he's Leslie
Nielsen.
So... she answers the door for him and is suitably panicked, and she blurts out, I thought my brother was a burglar. I shot my brother. He goes in to check things out while she then takes care of the key situation really fast by, I believe that she places the key
Well, now she's dealing with 2 keys.
Well, yeah, because now
Because
she has a spare key.
she has the spare key that she was not prepared for.
Right.
And she also has his initial key that she hid from him, that she took from him. So she's got 2 keys. So she takes his keychain and puts the original key that she took off of the keychain back on the keychain, and she tosses that into the bushes.
Right, because that was supposed to be the idea is that it was dark and he dropped his keychain in the bushes, right?
And then what she did is she took the spare key and hid it behind a planter by the front door.
Right, because she didn't know where that was.
Yes.
She didn't know where that spare key was. He just said he hid it out front.
And it's not the planter outside the front door, I should clarify, where it's actually hidden from. She hid it in the inside of her house. Like, so if you just walk in, maybe it was like a vase or something on a pedestal. Yeah, it was in the foyer. Yeah. So she hid that there because the cops are going to be there any second. She's now got her boyfriend here.
Right.
She's got she's got an audience.
Yes.
And by the way, I still got to say, she did a good job. This is still pretty plausible. Yeah. Peter doesn't suspect a thing. It makes sense. He doesn't
suspect a thing. We'll find out in a little bit that it even stood up to a coroner's inquest about a week later. So she did a great job.
She did.
So now we finally have our Columbo entrance. It's now about 21 minutes into the show, and Columbo shows up.
Police Department, Lieutenant Columbo. Would you mind if I came in?
Reading a newspaper. And, of course, it's the newspaper that Bryce left in the foyer that she forgot to run and grab.
Right.
And, of course, there's the calculator ad on that, too. Columbo's reading the newspaper. Somebody else gives him a joking hard time about it, saying, getting caught up on your reading, Lieutenant? Not really.
Right.
So we already know that that's going to be important because why is he reading a newspaper in
at a crime scene? Yeah.
She is now, again, I'm sure part of it is acting and part of it is I just killed my brother and the plan went slightly wrong. So she's not hysterical, but she's certainly distraught.
Yeah.
They're interviewing her, and of course it's the same voices we heard in the dream because they were played by the same actors. Right. But they're also still like, oh, you thought it was a burglar? Like that part went perfectly well.
Yeah. It's a good plan. I still maintain it's a good plan.
It's still a good plan. I'm glad you don't have any French doors. I may not visit for a while. It was definitely a good plan. I thought this was interesting. I really kind of only saw this for the first time when I rewatched it this time. Mm-hmm. Because it's something we see in so many police shows that I just kind of gloss over it. But when she first started getting a little upset, Leslie Nielsen came over to her, put his hands on her shoulders and said, come on, folks, that she's had enough. And she waved him off. Yeah. She said, no, it's okay. So this is the first time. So her brother hasn't even been dead an hour, and she's already starting to assert herself.
I noticed that too. And Peter, really Leslie Nielsen, I was actually a little, he was a little taken aback by it. He was a little surprised. Yeah,
just briefly.
It was an expression on his face.
It was definitely an expression that they purposely lingered on. And then when she started to get upset even more, then he felt comfortable saying, hey, guys, come on, seriously, enough is enough. I did think that was really an excellent little scene because we'd seen it so many times we wouldn't think about it. How many times have we seen somebody start to get upset and the person say, hey, let's do this later, and the person say, no, it's okay, I want to go on.
Right.
But this was a little different somehow, and it was just, again, very well done.
Very well done.
I think the very next scene is the next day, if I'm not mistaken, and Columbo is on a ladder looking at the light bulb from the front porch.
Right.
So he already is doing his due diligence.
He's already on it.
He's already wondering why, what's the deal? Why did her brother have to go around front and break things?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
While he's on the ladder, a cab driver pulls up with the mother, Mrs. Chadwick, the widow and matriarch of the family.
Right.
We also meet Enrico, the little dog.
He's a Yorkshire Terrier, right?
He looks like it. I think she called him some other breed, but I think he's a terrier. I think I think at the script he was another breed, but to me he looked very much like a terrier.
Okay.
But it's just a little yappy dog, yapping at Columbo.
Dog. Yes.
I mean, just adorable.
Yeah.
And also the only one in the family smart enough to know that Columbo's already on to everybody because he's just completely barking at Columbo.
Yeah, he's relentlessly barking at Columbo.
Every time.
Yes.
So the mother gets out of the cab.
She gets out of the cab. That dog is barking. She's barking orders at the cab driver, at Columbo.
Yes.
to pay the cab driver, take in her bags because she has no idea that he's a lieutenant.
Right, exactly. She treats him the way that you, and again, a nice way to tell us, the audience, that this is how she treats everybody, that the world are her servants. She sees a guy at a house and tells him, pay the cab and get my luggage.
And I know what's interesting about that, too, is that how many servants does she have that this would be the first time she would ever see this person, but it wouldn't even register? Like, it's just a faceless servant, right? Yeah. So she could have 30 servants or 5, and it doesn't matter because she doesn't register them in any way. She doesn't as people, so she wouldn't know their names. She wouldn't recognize their faces because he is new to this scene. Obviously, he's not a servant. I mean, he doesn't look like a police officer, and he kind of does look like maybe he's repairing something. But then why would you have your handyman pay your cab and bring your bags in?
Exactly. It was just a way to show that this is just her world,
right?
That she could do that, because the butler and maid at least have uniforms when we see them later in the episode. You've got a guy in a trench coat looking at a light bulb. This is not somebody that you're going to want to say, hey, bring in my luggage.
Right.
You know? So, and he goes to the cab and says, does she have any luggage? And he's like, does she have any luggage? And he opens the door, and Columbo pulls out like 6 bags. And
I have to stop you there because I thought this could have been funnier.
Yeah.
This is a note I would send to the writers of Columbo. I'd be like, Baccio, listen, what you need to do is get your props department. It was 3 bags. Everybody calm down. It was 3 bags. There were 2 very large bags in a cosmetics case.
Yeah.
And she may just be there overnight. But, I mean,
well, we'd all packed
3 bags.
Yeah. I agree with you, because they were also in the front seat of the car. So I thought there was going to be the 3 in the front seat.
Yeah.
And then they opened up the trunk and there was maybe another 5. And that would have been funny.
That would have been, there should have been a trunk. There should have been a dolly that you had to put everything on. You know, it was just, it was 3 bags. She's one lady. She's an older lady. You know, give her a break. Maybe she had to carry her wig. You don't know.
Well, and they made a point of saying that when her husband died, she moved out of that palatial home into another town in California, I believe, further away. So, I mean, she was traveling. She's obviously coming up for her funeral.
Look, I'm not here to defend Mrs. Chadwick because, like you said, they're all pretty terrible. Right. But in this one tiny instance, they were like, it was supposed to be comical because then, like, Columbo's shuffling in with these bags. I'm like, it's really just 3 bags.
It's really not that big a deal.
Yeah.
So then, of course, there's the wonderful mother and daughter reunion where they're in the house, and Columbo starts talking to her because it was a $10.50 fare and he gave the guy $11.
Okay. And this is a theme now. I kind of picked it up on a few episodes beforehand. I think Columbo is supposed to be a little cheap.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I was just going to say, I think he's supposed to be a little cheap. Now, you know I looked up the money. I always look up the money, right? I can't help myself. So $11 in 1971 is the equivalent to just about $70 now. Right. That's a lot of money. I wouldn't want to be out that money when it's not your place. However, the tip that he gave him, which was a 50-cent tip, is the equivalent of $3.50.
Yeah. So you figure you're
pretty bad tip.
You're giving a pretty poor tip.
Less than 10%.
That's all he had, you know, but he wasn't expecting to pay it for a cab. I don't think it's supposed to be comically cheap, but I think it's supposed to remind us that he's an honest cop because he doesn't have the money to throw around. Whereas in a lot of these other episodes, you know, these policemen or commissioners or whatever live in palaces, and he's still making his detective salary. But even so, it's pretty clear he doesn't like to spend money.
I don't think he likes to spend money. You know, he took out, in the other episode, he took out the insurance agent to a hot dog stand. You know,
Tail of the pup.
You know, it's a $3.50 tip. Later on, he takes Peter out to lunch at, like, a drive-through, pretty much like a Sonic, I guess, or like a McDonald's.
The equivalent of that.
I mean, you know. But anyway, So, but again, I wouldn't want to be out $70, I'll be honest with you.
No, that's a lot of money to just cough up because someone went with the dog barked. Both of them barked at you.
They both barked at you. So so Columbo's trying to talk to her about the tip, and then Beth walks in to see her mother.
While Columbo's talking with the mother, trying to get his $11 back, the daughter comes into the scene, kind of overhearing things. The mother turns to the daughter and approaches her very straight-faced, almost robotically. Like you wonder, how's she gonna react?
Right.
With sympathy, saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, this is a terrible accident." No, she just hauls off and smacks her daughter full on the face.
She slaps her so hard that when I watched it, I was thinking, did that actress really slap Susan Clark, the other actress? Like, it looked very real.
It really did. If she didn't, they really timed that perfectly. Yes. Beth Chadwick's reaction to getting slapped by her mother was, did that make you feel better?
Yeah.
So again, not the type of reaction you would normally expect to getting slapped by your parent for having accidentally killed your brother. And again, we know she did it on purpose, but nobody else is supposed to know that.
Right.
So her reaction, the mother to slap her for doing that is just horrible anyway.
Yes.
But then she goes on and says, basically, to paraphrase, you've been worthless your whole life. Everybody has had to run your life for you.
Yes.
And you killed my son, not you killed your brother.
Your brother.
I don't know if she said you destroyed, I can't remember, but she used an odd phrase for you killed my son. And Columbo's right there. And Beth says, oh, sorry, this must be awkward for you. And Columbo says, nah, I come from a large Italian family. We basically usually smack each other around. It looks like Madison Square Garden.
Yeah,
and,
he says what he said.
And then we patch it up with some coffee. So Beth says, let me get some coffee. And Beth is already kind of back to smiling, like, oh, let me get you some coffee. You know, like this is a normal hostess thing to do.
Right.
Right after being slapped by your mother and basically being accused of murdering your brother.
Well, I don't even know if it's accusing her of murdering her brother. It's just like, ugh, you're the one that's left behind.
Yeah.
It's sort of that sentiment of like, oh, God, I had a great one and a stinker, and now I got the stinker. And of course, it's the stinker's fault that the good one's gone.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
you're right.
I don't know if she suspected her of murder, but more like, you're so incompetent that, of course, his downfall is your fault.
Yeah. No, you're right. She just basically was saying, you're so worthless and the wrong one died. Basically. Right. And, of course, it would be your fault that you would kill the one good thing I got left. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So then Beth leaves, and this is like just such a funny little scene to me. I don't know if you noticed it, but the mother walks over to this like grand piano and picks up a picture of a photograph of Bryce, right? And now can we just talk about this photograph?
Yes. Because it's his headshot.
It's his headshot. It's like an 8.5 by 11 full-on headshot of the actor that plays Bryce, and he sort of looks like a John Saxon. Okay, what's his name? Richard Anderson?
It's Richard Anderson, and yes, they got very similar movie roles. They would often play very similar parts, and they do physically
a lot like John. Yeah. Which I always think of Mom, because I know John Saxon from Nightmare on Elm Street, and she's like, oh no, he was like a heartthrob, and Mom loved him.
Yes.
But and it's this hilarious, serious picture of Bryce, and I'm just like, can you imagine if you had a picture of yourself scowling, right? And you're like, you know what, this is perfect, let me blow it up, frame it, and then put it decoratively on my grand piano. It's just hilarious. I'm definitely going to take headshots of myself looking that stern and just strategically place it around my house, because it's just so funny. Because usually it's like a family photo, like it could have been them skiing as a family, like they're so wealthy, like on the French Alps or something. But it's like it's a picture. It's his headshot of him looking stern in a business suit.
And by the way, a headshot of him probably about a year before this episode. That wasn't,
you're right.
It's not like it was his college graduation photo. This would be like me taking a photograph of myself looking stern and serious today.
Correct.
And putting it on a dining room table or something, because there were no other photos. It wasn't even like it was an area with a bunch of family photos. It was just his very serious headshot sitting on a piano.
It was just to remind Beth that she just makes terrible decisions, and she's probably a bad piano player. So if she's playing the piano and looks up and sees that, he's like, you're also terrible at this,
Beth.
Beth.
That's right. You're bad at this, by the way.
So that cracked me up. So then Columbo and Mrs. Chadwick are just talking about basically how much Bryce is the bee's knees and that Beth is the worst. And I think that's the first time we hear that she also disapproves of Peter Hamilton.
Yes.
And I think she's the one that calls him a fortune hunter.
Yes, because in the conversation with Bryce at breakfast, He just basically was putting it in terms like, well, you know what he is. And even more devastatingly, if you weren't a member of this wealthy family, do you think this guy would give you a second look?
Right.
I
He
mean,
was like, he's like, you're mousy and worthless.
Yeah.
Is basically what he's saying to you. And he's debonair, brilliant, and good at his job. So he would never even think twice about you.
Yeah.
You're right. He did say that.
Yeah. No, that was a pretty devastating last shot across the bow as he just and then said that and walked away practically.
He like grabbed a bite of toast and left.
Yeah.
He's like, a bye.
So, and so you're right. The mother's the first one to use the phrase fortune hunter.
Yeah. Which I love.
Yeah, it is. So as a matter of fact, when she came back with the coffee and some cookies, was that when Columbo started to talk about the newspaper? Because it was the first time he was speaking with her, and it was as usual by the way, I'm just letting you know that I think that there's more to the story here than meets the eye.
He was really harping on her, and that was the first time that as an audience we were clued into what was bothering Columbo, and it was the newspaper. But he really took Beth through step by step, like, now you said you were home all day, it was the butler and the maid's day off. And he was just sort of trying to establish background information that no one could have brought that newspaper to the house except for Bryce. And Beth did say, well, we got the newspaper delivered. What is your problem? Like, that's why the newspaper's there. And that's when Columbo revealed, oh, well, this is the evening edition.
Yes.
Which doesn't get delivered.
It doesn't get delivered. And he made her commit at least twice, like you said, to saying, I never left the house. So we know that she couldn't have gone out and got the late paper.
She didn't get the paper. The maid or the butler didn't get the late paper. No, Peter didn't show up with the late paper. Nobody showed up with the late paper.
And he made a point of asking Peter, is this your paper?
That's right. He did.
That's first night, just so that he could cross off one more person who could not have brought the paper.
So the only person that could have brought that paper in would have been Bryce. And the idea, and here's the thing, too. The idea is that how did that paper get to the front door?
Right.
Because Beth, when she was cleaning up everything, when it was all frenetic and frenzied, she left the newspaper by the front door, but gathered everything else and brought it into the scene of the crime.
Right.
So the idea would be, how did it get to the front door? Did you bring it to the front door? Why would you bring it to the front door? If Bryce came in through your French doors, then all of his items should be there and nothing should be by the front door. So that's really what's hanging Columbo up.
Yes.
This is what's bothering him.
It's his first little odds and ends that he can't tie up is, why did that paper wind up in the foyer?
And I have to say, once again, Beth, man, savage. She's good. She thinks quick on her feet. Honestly, she probably should run that company, because she, off the top of her head, comes up with basically, well, I don't know, I could have moved it to the front door when I was getting Peter from the front door. That's a valid answer,
Sure.
It's a valid answer. And Columbo said something dismissive about it, and her mother, who did just slap her, did say to Columbo, listen, people are inconsistent when they're in a state of shock. I actually think this is all very valid answers to him having a nagging feeling about a newspaper. I think, do you know how many times, what I did just the other day? I was putting away stuff from dessert, and it was late at night and I was tired. And then the next morning I opened up the fridge and I found a carton of ice cream in my refrigerator.
Right.
Instead of in the freezer. So people do stuff all the time. And I was like, and I looked at it, I'm like, how did that get there? And I was like, I must have done that. So you do things absentmindedly all the time. And, I didn't murder anybody. So I was just tired.
You were just tired. Yeah, no, I'd absolutely almost thrown my car keys out if I had garbage in one hand and my car keys in the other. It's just something that happens. Your brain clicks. So yeah, absolutely.
So this bothers Columbo, but I also think Beth was very quick on her feet with an answer. And her mother defended her in a very realistic way. I think people are in shock, and you do weird things when you're in shock.
Yes. But I do know that the news bothered her so much that her cookie went pale.
It did. That's very funny.
So now, I think, again, a very fast-moving episode. We're basically now, and we don't know this yet, but we find out that this is about a week later.
Sure.
And that we're now at the coroner's inquest getting a decision on it. And Marcia Wallace is sitting next to Columbo.
Is that Mrs. Krabappel?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yep. Or as I might have called her, Carol, the receptionist on the Bob Newhart show.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
But absolutely, Mrs. Crabapple. That is absolutely her.
That's a good little role for her.
It was great because she was basically saying, oh, this woman is going to get off because the moons in the month of Venus or whatever nonsense was very
All
popular
that like
in the
70s like astrology. I love it. Yeah.
It's great. Again, another little window into the time period. And of course, the inquest finds that it was an accident. The coroner's inquest says, hey, this was an accident. This was a death by misfortune or whatever the phrase they used. But basically, yes, you shot your brother because you said you did, but it was an accident because it was reasonable to think that this was an accident. And that was it. That should have been the end of the episode.
Yeah. Columbo really harasses her in this episode. He flat out, I think he goes, first of all, I hope there's no other unsolved crime going on in LA at the time, because he's now solving a crime that technically was solved.
Technically was not a crime.
Right. He's investigating something that's not a crime. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, but that's not going to stop Columbo because he knows that it is a crime.
Right.
So at that point, Columbo stops Peter from leaving the courtroom to have a talk with him. And that's when, yes, he takes him out to basically a drive-in.
Like a Burger King.
Drive-in burger shack.
Yeah.
The waitress, a cute little funny bit of business. Now let me know. Don't drive. Everybody always drives away with the trays attached to the windows. Just let me know so you don't drive away with it. So, of course, we already know that's exactly what's going to happen.
He's going to drive away with the tray on it, yeah.
And he does. And
so what happens is Columbo wants to meet up with Peter because Peter is now suddenly free for lunch because Beth has a lot of appointments to attend to after the coroner's inquest.
Okay, so that's why I thought a scene skipped. Is because she did it immediately. The second they said, you're free to go. All right, call a meeting at 2:00 with all the chairmen. I've got to do something at noon, and blah, blah.
So then Columbo and Peter are having lunch together, and Columbo really has a conversation with Peter about what was the nature of him and Beth's relationship. What's the nature of Peter's relationship with Bryce?
Yeah.
That's when Columbo finds out that Peter was really only going over there because he got a certified letter. It was so formal, but it was basically like, break up with my sister or you're getting fired, which I'm sure, I don't even know if that's illegal. I don't know what you can do with a private company. It's not great.
I'm sure it was phrased in such a way that it was probably legal or 1971 legal.
1971 legal.
Which is basically, look, drop her or you're fired, but I can't really say that. So we'll say, if you continue to date her, it'll be considered a conflict of interest or, something where they could justify firing him if he kept dating her.
And Peter did say that Bryce's death was pretty fine. It was okay. Because he felt badly about it, but Bryce has been pretty much a thorn in their side, their entire relationship.
Yeah, he did say that Bryce's death got her out from under his thumb.
Yes.
And then Columbo says, way out under her thumb. And then Peter had the nerve to be annoyed by that. Well, what do you mean by that? You just said him dying made her life a lot easier.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little silly.
You can't get aggravated. You can't get on the defensive. For somebody to agree with you.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with you. But to be fair, he agreed the heck out of him with it.
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry about poor Bryce being killed, but it has gotten Beth out from under his thumb.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, way out. Huh?
What's that supposed to mean?
And that's when Columbo said, so really, his death was maybe the best thing that ever happened to her, taking it that one step further still, and just kind of planting that seed in his mind.
Well, it kind of is.
Yeah. Well, it pretty objectively is.
Right?
Yeah. So we don't see, he of course pulls away with the tray, the waitress stops him, whatever, funny little bit. But now they're heading over to Eugene's.
Yes.
Columbo, rather, is heading over to Eugene's to see her getting her hairstyle.
And again, full-on harassment. I'm sorry. Yeah. She has been cleared of any wrongdoing. This is not a crime. She's just getting her hair done, and he shows up to her private appointment while she's not just getting her hair done, she's getting a full-on makeover, but she is in a hair salon getting her nails done, getting her hair done, and she's getting a whole new look. And Columbo kind of comes bumbling into this very high-end salon called Eugene's.
Which, by the way, he only found out she was there because he showed up at her house saw that she had a brand new
right.
car delivered.
Oh, you're right. With the maid
Spoke to the maid and butler,
right.
and the maid was the one who told him where it was. And so that's when he saw she got this new fancy car that was delivered. She had it specially ordered. And so then now he's at Eugene's, and the receptionist had to politely tell him that his cigar was not really compatible with the fragrance of the salon.
She had a lot of patience. I miss customer service like that because she had a lot of patience. Yeah. And he comes bumbling in with that cigar, looking the way that he does. It's a very high end, I mean, a hilarious 1970s high end. You know, it's like a red carpet and all pink walls, pink everything, pink.
A huge place that has 3 customers in it.
Has 3 customers. It reminds me of like Valley of the Dolls or Stepford Wives. It's very sort of like, it's only those 2 colors. It's red and pink everywhere, which is such a color clash now. But at the time, it's like so perfect. Yes. But he comes walking in. She holds his cigar for him because he's not allowed to walk around with that odor, basically. Yeah. And he tracks her down, and she's getting her hair cut by Eugene, who owns the salon.
Yeah, and it's funny because he is working that hair.
Oh, he is. I wonder if he's a real salon. I wonder if he really does hair, because he knew what he was doing, that actor, if he didn't. He was working. There's a roll brush. I mean, he's got it happening.
To the point where, because we didn't see the front of her face for so much of that scene, that I honestly didn't know that was the actress in there. I thought that was a stand-in because he was precision swirling that hair. But then, no, she stands up and we see that it's her, and there was no cut. I was looking for the cut. I really did think I was wondering if that was a stunt head to get her hair done, just because the framing of the shot was so weird. It was just the back of her head, you know.
And there wasn't like a mirror. Like there was a mirror there, but we couldn't see her through the mirror. So it was like a weird choice.
It was, and I'm sure it's just because they wouldn't want to see the camera show up in the mirror, so they had to shoot it at an angle. Right. But even so, like it was almost like if you wanted to intentionally hide her face, you would have done that. But there'd be no reason to.
Maybe they wanted like a big reveal though, because she is transformed. Yes. I mean, she is transformed. She went from looking like a very preppy. Certainly attractive. I think attractive. I know that she was supposed to be sort of mousy, but she looked like sort of like a preppy J. Crew type model, right? Yes. And now she's like hubba. She's got like the bob. She's got like skin. Her outfit is painted on her person, you know. But she's got her nails done. She's got her makeup done. She's got a severe side part to that bob, you know. So she looks kind of dynamite.
She really does. And I think he just basically wants to invite himself back to her house.
He does.
To do an experiment. Mm-hmm. Because he finds out from her that she's not going back to the meeting yet, that she was just going back home. I think he even tells her, "Oh, you got, you know, your new car came in." So he
he did. He lets her know the car came in. That's right. And he asked her about the timing of the ordering.
Yes, because he said, "Oh, I thought you have to order these things weeks in advance," and she said, "You do." Mm-hmm. Now that makes me wonder, was she really planning to kill her brother for that long? Or was it just one of those things where once she committed, because this was a week later, did she just think, well, let me order a new car?
Oh, no, I think, look, if I were her, I'd spend my entire life plotting to kill my brother. So, I mean, I think she was planning it. I think if she wavered, maybe that conversation at breakfast put it over the top. Right. But I think she planned it. I don't think there was any hesitation there. I think she planned it for the entire time and was committed. And it's sort of like, now I made the good decision.
Right.
Because you are continuing to be the worst.
Well, it is true that they had the argument. Mm-hmm. She then took the key off the ring. So she was already starting the plan. And then the conversation, I think you're right, just made her say, yeah, I'm making the right decision to kill this guy.
But sidebar, I think it was the right decision anyway.
Well, there's an argument
I don't want to advocate for murder, but
there's an argument to be made for that.
Yeah, so Columbo wants to go back to, he shows up to the salon to harass her about the car and to invite himself back to the mansion to conduct an experiment all about the grass clippings.
Right. Well, before we get there, I just did want to quickly mention that the receptionist who he then retrieved the cigar from is also the same woman in the other episode with Leslie Nielsen. She is the woman who ran the photography booth that Columbo went to later on that episode.
Really?
Yes.
That's amazing.
So she and Leslie Nielsen were both in 2 episodes of Columbo.
That's very funny. Oh, that's really cute. I love that.
Yeah. I almost made that by one more thing, but they go back to the house. It is about grass clippings, and that's how we explicitly find out that it's been 1 week since the murder, because we find out that every Thursday the lawn is cut, and therefore there's loose grass, and her brother was shot on a Thursday, and therefore why didn't he have grass on his feet?
Right.
And the answer is because he never walked across the grass.
Mm-hmm.
But her explanation, again, like many Columbo killers, a perfectly good one. Well, it must have brushed off his shoes on the way into my house through the French doors. And by the way, the place is clean, so there isn't any grass to be found.
They have a maid and butler on staff, among other servants, but they have a maid and butler on staff, so I think it is going to get clean.
Yeah, and then she asserts herself again and says, okay, this was fun, but seriously, back off.
And she's not wrong.
No.
Yeah.
No. Because her entertaining this at all was just purely her. I don't know if she just wanted to see what he thought or what he knew.
Yeah, right.
Because she really probably should have said at the beauty parlor, "What are you doing here? Get away from me."
Let me get my attorney.
There is no case. There is no case because there is no crime.
Because it was ruled, the official verdict, I actually wrote it down and found it was ruled death by accidental means.
Death by accidental means. Okay.
That's what I learned. Yep, I wrote it down. Yep. Okay. I just found it.
I think he also goes round front because this is the same time at the house before she says, okay, seriously, enough's enough. He shows her where the spare key was hidden by having an outside flower pot and showing her, but not the audience, a groove in the dirt. Yeah,
it was an imprint of, or like a mold, I guess, of where the key would have been for the past several months or years even. Months, sure.
And she comes up with a good explanation for that. Which
good explanation.
Yeah. It's as well, you know what, I had the key, but I thought, what's the point of having an alarm system if you're going to have a key outside that a burglar could find? And therefore, because the idea with the alarm system is if you had a house key, it would turn off the alarm system when you entered.
Right. And it's a good point because it's like, do you remember, I think this was like in the 80s, definitely the 90s, when everyone had like those fake rocks that you would put by your front stoop. Absolutely. And it had a little slide cover underneath it. So the first time I saw that, I'm like, this is genius. And then literally everybody had it. And it's like, well, that's clearly a key rock. Right. Like you might as well just have a key on a keychain hanging on a nail by your front door because then everybody had it. Yeah. So I think her again, a good quick on her feet. Her answer is, oh, we used to do this. Now we have an alarm. Now we're no longer doing this, which is the same argument I would have with the rock, where it's like, yeah, I used to have a key rock and now I don't because it's stupid. Because everyone has it.
Everybody knows it. You might as well go back to putting the rug under the mat, which is where everybody used to have a key before the rocks.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah. So I thought, again, a good answer. And she's kind of shutting him down. Everything he's throwing at her, she's got a good explanation. The newspaper, the grass clippings, the key so far. Those are the main points so far.
Really, really good. Really shut him down. The only thing I will say is that I know that Richard Anderson's a tall man, but that spare key was on a flower pot that was like 7 feet in the air. It was Columbo had to get on a ladder, and I know he's shorter, but they probably should have gone with a shorter pedestal for it, or maybe a ground pedestal for that or something. Because that I did have to laugh at that. That was way higher. Like you have to stretch even being as tall as him. I mean, it wouldn't be out of character for him, but clearly that was a spare key just for Bryce because she could never have reached it, and he never told her about it. So
and he probably was like, "Why are you leaving the house, you idiot?" You know what I mean? Like that's how he treated her. So
pretty much,
So she at this point I think is pretty annoyed. I think she's done with Columbo. She's done playing along. She hears what he has to say. She has an official ruling. She has the law on her side. Yep. He's now just bugging her, and she also has good answers to what there's no gotcha, That's right. At this point in the episode, there's no gotcha. So
there really isn't. There really isn't, because in every episode we talked about so far, there is that, I would have flown if it were me, it's just that there's none of that. Everything she said so far has been perfectly reasonable.
A reasonable explanation. And then so that's when the next scene, she does meet up with Peter. and she's shopping in like this like
That's right.
super trendy. It's like out of Austin Powers, like this
Yes.
like boutique where there's like music. There's a bar for the rich men that you go shopping with to sit down and drink at while you
And play
shop.
pool.
And play pool.
Yeah.
And she's got a personal shopper, and Peter is not having it. He doesn't like it. He liked his little preppy J. Crew model. You know, she puts on one crop top and he's like, I don't like how you're acting. You know, it's like, all right, you know, maybe calm down. This is why I want to talk about their relationship a little bit.
This is a good time to do that. Yeah.
Let's take her at her word. Right now, we as an audience are clued into she did just murder her brother in cold blood.
Right.
Gleefully. Yes. But he doesn't know that. Peter doesn't know that. And so she did just kill her brother accidentally. She went through an inquest about it, and her world has completely changed. She lost her father, she lost her brother, and now Peter doesn't like that she got a new haircut and put on a crop top. Like he doesn't like it. So what are let me get your thoughts on their relationship.
I would say I don't think he was a fortune teller. I'll just start right off with that.
Okay, a fortune hunter.
A fortune hunter. Yeah. No.
I also don't think he was a fortune teller.
I don't think he was whipping out the tarot cards anytime soon. No. I don't think he was, only because of what we had talked about before, which is he was successful enough in his own right.
Yeah.
Now, he could have been a social climber. He might have wanted to get to the next level. I mean, there was everything that made me believe that he had genuine affection for her. However, now that you're right, I think I think he fell in love with her the way she was.
Yes.
And now she's so completely transformed, and even used the phrase transformed, that maybe it wasn't the kind of woman he was interested in. Like, hey, if I wanted to date someone from the Mod Squad, I could have done that.
Right. So, because I think you're right. I don't think he's a fortune hunter. I think it's very plausible that successful people date successful people.
Right.
Wealthy people date wealthy people. So I don't think he was after her money. I do think he did love her, but I do think he loved her as she was, and she was stifled. So he loved the stifled version of her.
Yes. I think that she was definitely starting to bloom, maybe even go too far in the other direction, which you would expect. If you're 45 years old and you've been under somebody's thumb your whole life, you know, I mean, he's lucky she wasn't, you know, just doing a ton of drugs and getting drunk and dating 1,000 guys, just because she's got like literally a lifetime to make up for.
To catch up for it, yeah.
And I think he was starting to have second thoughts. I know that it was only like, you know, an hour and a half episode, so they had to really escalate things. You know, you know that in real life he wouldn't have been just like, oh, you got a new haircut and a new dress. I don't like this new you know.
Well, what do you think?
Interesting.
What does that mean?
Well, it's wild. A little out of your style, though, isn't it?
No, I don't think it is.
Well, you asked.
Yeah, it was a courtesy. I'm perfectly capable of making my own decisions.
Beth, why don't you finish your wardrobe? I'm going back to the office.
No, I want you to wait till I'm ready to go. Do you have trousers that go with the red top? Yes, we have some.
And I'm not sure what's gotten into you, but I'm not sure I like it. I'll see you. If you need me, I'll be back at the office.
So she's already kind of blowing him off a little bit, which is fine because she should be standing up on her own 2 feet and doing what she wants. And I think it's entirely possible that he may not have wanted that. And that doesn't reflect badly on either of them. I just think that she's now becoming the person she probably always would have been if she wasn't held down so hard. And maybe he's somebody who wouldn't necessarily been attracted to that kind of person.
Exactly.
And so, you know, I don't really put that on either of them. I don't really think that reflects poorly on either of them. I think maybe slightly poorly if he's interested in somebody who's so repressed, but, you know.
I don't think they seem to have a good time with each other. So I don't think she was necessarily repressed with him. I think she was repressed in her personal choices or how she was allowed to behave or dress in the household or in the company. Certainly she had no role in the company. So I don't think he was out of line, and I think it really is just what we discussed. I don't think he was a fortune hunter. I think he loved her, and I think she changed. It's like when your girlfriend goes away to summer camp and she comes back like a whole new person, and like you're like, oh my god, you're smoking cigarettes now? Like, what happened? Who are you?
I don't think I like this new you.
So I kind of felt it was more along those lines than him having any sort of agenda.
Well, he certainly didn't seem to me to have an ulterior motive.
Yeah. Because
honestly, if he was a fortune hunter and then she was taking over the company, jackpot.
Yeah, I mean, ding, ding, ding. Which is, again, why, it's interesting just to jump back a little bit. When Columbo and Peter were having a lunch at the burger joint,
right?
Columbo lets him know that he didn't suspect him.
Yes.
Very early in the episode. And honestly, I thought that was strange as an audience member. And I guess we're just supposed to just accept that Columbo's sort of all-knowing.
Yeah.
But to me, it would make perfect sense that her and Peter went in on it together. I get doubting her. Yes. I get that this is a weird circumstance for somebody to die. If somebody did die this way, what a tragic series of events to have them die. So you'd want to look into it. I get it.
Right.
But Peter was actually there that night, and he's really her alibi. So it's very strange to me that Columbo's like, I don't think you have anything to do with it at all. I thought that was weird.
It was weird because basically Peter said what you had said, which is, do you think that Beth and I conspired to kill her brother Bryce?
Yes.
And Columbo said, oh, I don't think it's a conspiracy.
That's right.
I don't think you had anything to do with it.
Yes.
Heavily implying on the spot that he did in fact think that Beth had intentionally killed him.
Yeah.
And Peter, being a lawyer, was also smart enough to not. They made him actually a pretty good character in that he was smart. He boasted of having a good memory, and he did. They did a lot of things with him, when he could have really been just a throwaway guy, just the boyfriend who's now upset, but they did a lot because Leslie Nielsen, I'm sure.
Yeah, you're not going to cast Leslie Nielsen just to be a throwaway boyfriend.
Exactly. Exactly. So now I guess then after, because she's wearing that great outfit with the hat.
Oh my God. So the next scene is the boardroom scene. And so this is my favorite because the board last saw her dressed as a preppy little school marm. And now she comes walking in and dressed as like Huggy Bear. Like, her outfit is spectacular. It is spectacular. Let's discuss her outfit, please.
Yes, of course. We have to. So she's got this hat that looks like it could have been a football helmet made out of pudgy fur. Right off the bat, we'll start with that hat.
That hat is like, it's a brimmed cap, but it's inflated. It's like what one of the gang from like Fat Albert wear. That's what she's wearing, but it's like also pink patchwork suede. So it's light pink, dark pink, alternating like a mauve, really. And it's suede, and it's just glorious.
Yes.
She has on a pink, skin-tight, ribbed mock turtleneck that zips up the back, so it's like super tight.
Yeah.
And she's wearing a high-waisted, upholstery, floor-length skirt that looks like the couch from like the Golden Girls. It's like super floral.
Yes. And the pattern goes up not to the hips,
right,
but all the way up to above the belly button but below the chest. So it looks like a guy wearing high water pants. But and then she had the matching shawl, right? Didn't she have some kind of...
It was a duster. So it's a floor-length jacket that matches that high-waisted maxi skirt.
Yes.
with the hat and the zipped up turtleneck. So it's just like a spectacular. So again, just what she dressed like before was like a white blouse tucked into a sensible skirt.
Yes.
And then with the, like, we as an audience, and Peter got to see that she was trying on like roller derby outfits at that personal shopping place. But then the board, can you imagine walking into a boardroom where they're all in suits? They're all Bryce basically. So they're all, it's a boardroom filled with the
suits.
Dark suits. There's women and there are men in there, and they're all in suit. All of them are in suits.
Yeah.
And the mother, that jerk, comes strolling into that meeting as well with the dog.
Yeah. I was hoping they'd say Ernesto had controlling voting power.
That would have been the best twist. It's like, no, Beth, you can't hold this meeting because Ernesto did not approve it. And he comes walking in with a duster and outrageous outfits.
That's right. No, sorry, Beth, but Ernesto, we don't have a quorum without Ernesto.
So, and now here's the whole thing. So she now holds this meeting, right, to
Right.
make a bunch of announcements that obviously we'll talk about. But is she proving everybody right? Is she just this impulsive, petulant child running things this way? Or is she now just taking the helm? What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm leaning toward she is right.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also saying we don't really have time to figure out if she's right because
Right.
we don't get a chance to see her plans in action. She could have done all of this and it all could have failed and tanked the entire company. But I'm leaning toward her being right only because she's not just so sure of herself, but because she had told her mother, Bryce didn't know it, but he was accidentally training me for this job because she was paying attention and seeing everything he was doing.
Right.
I do believe that she was looking at current trends. We certainly know, at least in this day and age, that even an advertising company that's supposed to advertise other products should be advertising itself too.
You're absolutely right, because that's the announcement that she makes. She shows up, she's like, surprise, I'm wearing all pink and I'm now your president. She says that exactly what you just said, which is that it's great that we have all these accounts, but we need to grow. So we now need to advertise ourselves to gather even more clients.
Right.
And there's a lot of like, like amongst the board members. They don't like it. They're like, taking off their glasses and sweating and looking very uncomfortable with this announcement.
And of course you have the one spokes guy.
Yeah.
Like, well, I don't want to lecture you. He's getting shot in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Well, forgive me, but that's not how we do things around here. Oh, forgive me, but that's now how we do things.
That's right.
Basically she's shooting him down, and when he won't stop, when he keeps trying to shut her down, because don't forget, they don't know that her whole life, practically every word out of her mouth was shot down.
That's
So
right.
for this guy who's just on the board saying, well, frankly, we blah, blah. And she's like, look, you don't have to agree with me, but you also don't have to work here anymore.
She's like, sir, I've been slapped by my mother and by her dog all the time. I know how to take a hit. You can't shut me down.
Yeah.
And she did. She threatened his job. And then she made the other big announcement that she's promoting Peter.
Yes.
Who's the attorney to a vice presidency position.
Right.
And then
the other big announcement.
The bigger announcement.
At the very end is, oh, by the way, Peter and I are getting engaged.
Oh, wait, actually, I have to say this is actually perfect. Yeah. She doesn't say, oh, by the way. She actually says one more thing.
Oh, okay, yes,
she
of course.
does, which is my favorite. So,
yeah.
Everyone's, so she makes this announcement. She's like, surprise, I dress in pink. Don't disagree with me. You'll be fired. I'm expanding this company. I'm president. Peter's vice president. Everyone's mad. They get their jobs threatened, but they're happy to leave that meeting at this point.
And with their jobs.
Their jobs. The mother's milling about, and then Peter's milling about, and she goes, oh, one more thing. I'd like to announce my engagement to Peter Hamilton, your new vice president. And Peter looks a little surprised.
Right. With good reason.
Yes.
But to just back up a hair, again, we now see her obviously asserting herself to the board, but again, asserting herself to the mother in front of everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, the mother saying, oh, I'm still the guy of controlling interest in this. And she said, look, you're old.
She does say that.
If you want this to be a family business, who else you got?
Yep.
It's me. Shut up.
Yeah.
And she shuts up.
Now,
it would also be kind of funny if she said, it doesn't have to be in the family business. My husband's dead. I'm old. My son's dead. I'll just sell it to somebody. And that would completely
she
ruin
could have
her
sold
plan.
it to the guy that probably did know how to run things.
Yeah.
The question I have is, she announces her engagement to Peter.
Right.
But now Peter talks to her a little bit later in this scene. But I do want to talk about it
after
now.
everybody left. Yeah.
After everybody left. So Peter, but I did want to talk about it now. So Peter talks to her about it. Did he not officially propose to her?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
I wasn't sure. I couldn't get a read on that.
It was definitely clear because at first I thought, well, maybe he was upset that she announced it because he wanted to announce it.
Mm.
I thought it was pretty clear to me that he didn't actually propose, that she basically announced their engagement, because I guess in my mind, it wouldn't be such a big deal to announce an engagement if you were already engaged and she would do it. But it would be a very big deal if I didn't propose, and my fiance announced that we're now fiancés.
Okay, that's what I wanted to clear up. Okay.
To me, that's the only way to read that situation, because I think he even said I would have liked to, basically, and I know he didn't say it in this many words, which is why it was not as cut and dried, but it basically said I would have liked to have had a hand in the decision of us getting married, because she said, well, don't you want to get married? So to me, that would have been a question she wouldn't even have had to have asked if he said, hey, do you want to get married?
Right.
She also was never wearing a ring. So my feeling is he didn't propose to her yet, and that she was really sowing her oats and just saying, this is it, world, look out for me. And that was part of why he was upset. He certainly didn't want to hear about his promotion on the spot, because he felt like, oof, that makes me look bad here. Now you look like you're promoting me, not on merit, but because we're now engaged.
Right.
And at that point, I think he made the decision at the end of it to just say, well, I guess it wasn't a firm decision, but he walked out upset. He was about to walk out upset, saying basically, hey, you know what, maybe we need to slow this down a little bit here. This thing's really spiraling out of control here, which again, fortune hunter, he would have jumped all over that, said, yep, we're getting married, and I'm getting married to the new president of this company, and I'm vice president.
He's like a Madam President. Yeah.
So
let me take your hand.
To me, that settles that question completely.
True.
But of course, he doesn't have a chance to leave until Columbo walks in again at the end of the boardroom.
Columbo's really out of line in this episode, and I adore Columbo, so I hate to say anything negative, obviously, but I have a lot of issues, and he just walks into a closed board meeting at an advertising studio after there's no crime, and he's now he comes in talking to her about a light bulb, Yes.
And that is the purpose of it.
That's it.
He pulls a light bulb out of his pocket.
He pulls out the best yellow anti-bug light bulb. Like if you don't want, you remember those like from your porch light from the 70s and the 80s.
I do. We had them for years.
We have it. Yeah. If you don't want to attract a moth, you get a yellow. It's like an opaque yellow light bulb. I don't know what that illuminates. I think it just illuminates the radius directly underneath the light bulb.
I gotta tell you, they were pretty bright.
Were they?
They actually were. But that's because they were like 100-watt bulbs instead of 60. They were incredibly higher wattage, but they were tinted.
Okay, so they did the job. Okay.
Yeah, they got the job done.
So Columbo comes walking in, shaking a light bulb around, and he's like, oh, excuse me. And everyone is rightly horrified that he's there. Everyone's kind of surprised. The mother Mrs. Chadwick now has no patience. She was just threatened to be sued by her daughter if she continued.
And possibly put away in a home.
So Mrs. Chadwick has no patience for this. Ms. Chadwick also has no patience for Peter, because she does believe that Peter is a fortune hunter, a.k.a. male gold digger, favorite term of all time.
As opposed to Indiana
Jones.
Yeah,
like a gentleman gold digger.
Yeah.
So yeah, as opposed to
at least you didn't call him a gigolo. Yeah.
Right, because that's still somehow different. So then she's annoyed. Peter's annoyed because he was just promoted because he was now surprised engaged to Beth. And Beth's annoyed because she's like, I already killed my brother. I'm 5 moves ahead of you. I don't have time for this. So she's annoyed. And so Columbo shows up. That dog is going bonkers at this point. Yeah. That dog does not like Columbo.
That dog knows more than Beth and Peter and the mom combined. She knows that this is the end for them.
That's it. He's like his death knell. It's like his death toll. Yeah. So he's barking. Columbo even tries to give him a treat, I think, in this scene, right?
He does, and the dog ignores it. That Columbo says, I think we got a personality conflict here.
This dog is not having it.
No, because that was basically the excuse for the mother to leave the scene. She picks up the dog and then leaves the room, leaving Beth and Peter and Columbo together. And he essentially pulls out the light bulb and says, just to paraphrase it, this was a burnt out light bulb inside of a case. This was inside of a glass case, so it wasn't like a naked bulb. And this bulb is completely clean, no dust, no bugs, nothing like that. Again, I don't think that was the gotcha it was supposed to be, but it was
weak. Yeah. He's saying that, they have a staff that cleans everything. So again, Beth on it.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
She removes her duster. She sits down, and now she's wearing just the only half of the ridiculous outfit she was once wearing.
Right.
And she says, "Listen, we have a staff hired to clean everything, so they're going to clean a light bulb."
Our cleaning staff is so good, which, by the way, is still only a butler and a maid, so nobody's cleaning any light bulbs.
I mean, again, though, you're right. No one's cleaning a light bulb, but maybe if you have Mrs. Chadwick as once the madam of the house, you're going to clean a light bulb.
You're cleaning a light bulb.
You're cleaning a light bulb.
You're right. I got to take that back. Even to the point where he says they'd clean a burnt out light bulb, and she immediately shoots back, they clean during the daytime. They wouldn't know it's blown out. So she's just persistently shutting down all of Columbo's golly gee, one more things. And with that, she basically says, okay, I already said leave me alone. Yes. Now I mean really leave me alone, or I will get my lawyers, which is what she should have said from minute one. But now I think she's now learned all she's going to learn from him.
She doesn't have time for this. She doesn't have time for this. She has a wardrobe. She's got a new haircut. She's running a business. She's got to plan a wedding. She's got to get her mom that old bat in a home. Like she's got a lot. She's got to get a new headshot for her piano of herself looking delightful. So she's got a lot to do. She doesn't have time for him, and she makes no bones about it.
No.
I think she threatens. She doesn't threaten him with the DA, which she says to Columbo, if you think you have something, why don't you go ahead and contact the DA?
With the implication of, if not, I don't want to see you.
I don't want to see you. Yeah.
You're not going to be allowed in this building. You're not going to be allowed at my home. You're not going to be allowed any place where I am. Either arrest me or leave me alone.
That's right.
Which is perfectly reasonable.
Yeah.
And then when Columbo leaves, I have to laugh because she picks up the light bulb and throws it, and there's this comically outsized glass breaking sound. Like a bulb should have gone pop, and instead it sounded like, someone breaking a plate glass window.
What can we do about him?
Peter, and this is funny too, because Peter at this point is like, yikes. Like, he now is like, oh, I thought I didn't like a purple crop top. I definitely don't like you smashing light bulbs in your office.
And threatening lieutenants in the police department, homicide department. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was like, I gots to go. He did not like it. So Peter leaves. He goes downstairs and he's just drinking his sorrows away. That's a tough board meeting because you were told that you were now getting married and that you're promoted and these should be happy things, and he's not happy about any of it.
No.
So Peter's basically telling the bartender, give me another and another. And I don't know if he's drinking like an old fashioned, but it looks like a very 1970s sort of brown liquor drink. This is not like, let me have a little aperitif after dinner. He is like, I am drinking. I am drowning my sorrows away.
This is not give me a few beers. This is definitely hard liquor, old fashioned gin and tonic, something. This is definitely,
And then he sees Columbo. And again, because Peter is, no one's really stupid in this episode.
No, there's really no dopes in this.
There's no dopes, and no one's overplaying their hand, and no one's really even arrogant, I guess, to the point of their own downturn. So Peter's at the bar and sees Columbo and is like, oh, you just happened to be here?
Right, yeah. That's a funny coincidence that you just happen to be here. And at a bar, not drinking coffee.
Columbo's drinking coffee because he's on duty. So he's drinking coffee. And he's just casually reading through an inquest that, honestly, again, he shouldn't. Maybe it was a slow week because he should not be spending all this time trying to solve a non-crime.
He should have been solving Ruth Gordon's niece being drowned.
Oh, yes, he should have been.
But we'll get to that episode eventually. But yes.
Columbo's just sort of at the bar drinking coffee, reading through the transcript of the inquest. Then Peter kind of commiserates with Columbo about how he's unhappy how this meeting just went.
Right. And that's when Columbo wants to test Peter's memory.
That's right.
Because at the end, I have a minor bone to pick with this, but at the inquest, Columbo is saying as he's reading over the transcript, you really weren't specific. You said that, you heard the alarm, you heard the gunshots, but you weren't very specific about it. And then Columbo goes on to talk about how he's putting the cart before the horse.
Yes.
That his wife had that expression, and that he was saying in this case the cart is before the horse, although
Right.
he makes a mistake and accidentally says the horse is before the
The
cart.
horse is before the cart. I know.
but
I heard that.
it still wasn't that spelled out for us.
Mm-mm.
But well, I guess we'll get to that when we get to that part. But basically, he's letting us, the audience, know that he is talking to Peter about something that Peter said even the night of the murder, as well as the inquest. But we're not letting in on that.
We definitely weren't privy to Peter's testimony in an inquest.
That's right.
And then I did try to go back to listen to what Peter said when the police were first there at the crime scene, and really he doesn't say much of anything.
He does not.
For the audience purposes.
That's the bone that I have to pick with it, because we might as well talk about it now.
Okay.
What makes Columbo finally suspect or have some kind of gotcha at all is that Peter heard the gunshots first and then heard the alarm go off.
Right.
And they should have heard the alarm go off, surprising her to wake up and shoot. And that was the one mistake that she made because he was there.
Right. So the cart before the horse was what was out of order. It was gunshot first, then alarm, not
That's
alarm,
right.
then gunshot.
The bone I have to pick is that you're right. We see everything, or we're led to believe that we saw everything. Leslie Nielsen at no point says, yes, I heard the gunshots and then the alarm go off.
Right.
He didn't say it.
He doesn't say it. And when I went back and rewatched that scene, he's absolutely there to have witnessed it in that order.
Yes.
Right. So he's running. He hears the gunshot. He's running. And as he's running, the alarm goes off. Because there was a bit of a hesitation. It wasn't immediate.
No, because she was stunned. She was even had the presence of mind after she shot her brother to then immediately turn the alarm on.
She did.
But it was still a few seconds. There was still a few seconds
noticeable.
where, and it should have been the alarm going off and then gunshots. So, but yeah, when you rewatch the scene, I don't think Leslie Nielsen even answers in a word. They just say, did you hear the alarm and the gunshots? And he just went, rah, like he just made some noise. It was really funny. Look at it. So I don't know if they were just trying to make sure that that they didn't give it away too early in the episode, would be my guess.
Maybe. That sounds right.
Because they definitely didn't spell it out that early. And he definitely did not say anything that ought to have made Columbo say, hey, didn't you remember it the other way around? So that's my only little thing, but it's what it took to trip her up. Right. So we're now finally in her bedroom again.
Yes, and it's almost the exact same scene from the night of the murder, but now everything's different. So everything's the same, but nothing's the same. So she's in bed, but now she's in like a sexy lingerie type of evening. Now she's like a full-on lady of the, no longer like in a little cotton lace-up button-down nightgown. She's got like a negligee on, really.
Yeah, full-on negligee for nobody.
For nobody, because Peter is not having it.
No.
And she's drinking. She's smoking. She's reading like huge encyclopedias of, I'm guessing, just like advertisement business,
Probably. Yeah.
Just reading the trades or whatever she's doing. And she is
no chocolate
business.
to be found. Yeah.
No chocolate. There are pills.
To be found. Right.
There's pills this time around.
Yeah.
She's completely transformed. Completely transformed into who she always wanted to be. And she's just as happy as can be.
Yep.
She hears a little rustling outside. She hears knocking, and she's asking, who is it, while she's opening up her nightstand to get the gun again.
Right.
And she hears all this rustling outside. Who is it? She is genuinely alarmed at first. But then there's a smile on her face when she knows that it's Columbo, or she suspects that it's Columbo. Right. And she has every intention of killing him the moment he walks through the door, because that gun is out and leveled. And she even said, come on in, Lieutenant. Yeah.
So she was definitely telling him to come in. She was again gearing up to open fire once those French doors were open.
That's right.
And then, of course, Columbo walks in the same door that her brother did, and so again throws her off.
He throws her. Yeah. So once again, she's fooled. You would think that maybe you want to keep that door closed. But she's aiming the gun at the French doors because that's where she hears noise. And then what happens is Columbo comes in the same door that her real entrance to her bedroom, her regular bedroom door, which is what Bryce did the night that he was shot and killed. And Columbo does come in and kind of confronts her.
Yes. She kind of hides, but not really hides the gun because she has that lingerie with a little shawl over it.
Right.
I guess a sheer shawl.
Yeah.
And at that point, that's when he tells her about the cart before the horse, about how Peter solved the case for him, and she was upset, but he said, well, he didn't really mean to, but he told me blah, blah, blah. Right. And so that's when he lets her know that Peter heard the gunshots first and then the alarm. And even then, she was like, well, he must have been mistaken. Even then, she had an answer. It just wasn't good enough.
I'm just going to say a good answer. Yeah. Witness testimony is kind of wonky.
Yeah.
People have funny memories.
I mean, it would really be tricky to have that overturned just based on the fact that the one guy who already testified, would then have to say, well, no, I really meant to say that I heard the gunshots first. And then
Right.
But at some point, he said, I'm here to arrest you for the murder of Bryce. And she pulls the gun on him.
Oh, yeah.
And
she does.
One of the very, very few Columbo murderers who actually, especially in the original series, who actually then was planning on killing Columbo.
Yeah.
So he said, well, look, what's the point? There's a police officer outside. Besides, you're too classy a woman.
And you know what? This just sums up everything. She just needs one compliment that completely diffused the situation. She's like, oh, me? Like, she's like looking around like, I'm pretty? Ooh.
I'm classy.
Yeah, I'm classy. She got one compliment one time from one person, and she's like, all right. Yeah, who's arresting for murder? She's like, all right, let me go change it to something sensible. I'll see you in a minute. It's like somebody give her any attention. None of this would have happened. If Bryce let her date one of her jerk boyfriends from high school, she probably would have been a mom of 3 and everything would have been fine, but like.
Or she would have found out on her own that he was a jerk and then she could recognize jerks,
Right. So like Columbo's like, you're too classy a lady. And that immediately she's like, you know what? You're right. Let me put this gun down. Let me get she changes.
She immediately hands over the gun.
Yes.
And then goes into the bathroom to change.
Yeah.
And then that's when Columbo steps outside the French doors to have a smoke, and the camera pulls back, and that's the end of the episode.
And that's the episode. So maybe if you, like I said at the beginning of this, is that if you hug your daughters once in a while, they don't kill you. If you don't smack them as an adult, she was really treated pretty horribly by her entire family, by everybody but Peter, it seems like, as far as we can see.
Right.
Everyone treated her pretty terribly, and this is how it ended up.
Yeah, not great.
No, it didn't go well.
Not great because now the mother is going to have to figure out what to do with the business because her husband's dead, her son was killed, and her daughter is going to spend the rest of her life in jail for the crime.
I think we know the answer to that.
Yeah.
The answer is Ernesto.
Yeah.
That's who's taking over the family business.
Well, that's the only way that business is going to thrive at that point. Anything else would just tank. But that's the only way that business is staying.
Oh my God. So yes, that's the episode. But I do really like this episode for so many reasons. But the main reason is I think it's just a beautiful murder plan, a beautiful murder plot. I think it's easy to bob and weave when things went wrong. And I think she was a very formidable foe to Columbo, or foil, I should say, to Columbo, because everything he threw at her, she could throw it right back. And he really didn't have much to go on.
Even the last little he remembered the gunshots before the alarm. Even that she was able to shoot down. It was only, she pulled a gun on him. So,
she pulled a gun on him. We can obviously talk about it, but she pulled a gun on him, which you're not supposed to do. So she'll get you can get arrested for that.
Right.
But also it's like he was harassing her relentlessly. I don't know. We didn't talk about this. You know how he got into the house? Do you remember this? He found her locksmith, who was very happy to make him a copy of the key.
Yes.
So I'm hoping he had a warrant for that, but he
would have to have. He would have to.
He entered her house after freaking her out with the French door distraction.
Right.
So he was really laser focused on her. And Columbo, of course, is right. She did murder her brother in cold, but he's right. He is 100% right. He got it all figured out. He had it all figured out. She was a murderer, and she murdered her brother in cold blood for all these reasons. But I like this episode a lot. I thought she was a great murderer.
Yeah, I think so too. Because again, it's one of the more simple episodes of Columbo. It really follows a very straightforward story. There's not a lot of flipping around, not a lot of back and forth.
No.
It's just, here's a simple plan. Oops, there was a minor hiccup. I made a couple of mistakes during that minor hiccup that made him figure out it was me, and that's it.
Yeah.
End of story.
It was pretty
And yet
great.
it was so well done with so many good actors and so well written that it is still a very good episode.
It's a great episode, and again, I still think it's like a mark of a good plan that everything. I mean, really, can you imagine being her where you're like, I got this all figured out. I'm daydreaming about it. Like, this is what's going to happen. Bryce is a creature of habit. I can predict him to a T, and everything goes wrong.
Yeah.
And now she's dragging his like 6'2" body across her bedroom. She's like smashing windows with a briefcase, but she did get it together. Yep. And it was only because Peter showed up that she was in any trouble, really.
That's true. That's true. Otherwise, it would have gone exactly to plan.
Yeah, exactly.
So I suppose this is the part of the episode where we discuss, when did Columbo know?
How'd you know?
I suspected you 10 minutes after I met you.
Okay, so what do you think?
Okay. He kind of almost answered it a little bit for us.
Yeah.
At one point in the episode, he did tell her, when I saw the paper and it was the late edition and there was no other possible way that could come in, I think he knew then.
This is a short discussion because I completely agree with you. I think he knew with that paper when Columbo came on the scene at 21 minutes into this episode, or was that what you said? 21 minutes?
Yep.
He's reading the evening edition of that paper. So I think he knew with that newspaper.
So now's the part of the program where we decide, will it stand up in court?
Tell me, Doctor, how do you catch a man like that?
You don't?
You're probably right.
I've got some opinions on this.
I think this...
All right, I guess you got stronger opinions.
I do, because I think why are we even talking about it? It's so obvious. This one is like a no-brainer.
Okay, well, I mean, I agree. I think she's clearly going to jail. He's got her dead to rights, and that's it.
Well, I guess we have very different opinions on what we think is a no-brainer, because I think this is, of all episodes that we've looked at so far, the weakest, and I'm not so sure that Columbo's not going to jail. So, I mean, I am completely opposed. I don't know how we're going to even get through this.
Look, I mean, it's one thing for a doctor and a professor to talk about 1970s Columbo law. I think it's time we call in our sister, the lawyer.
Let's call Judy.
Hi, this is Judy. Just a quick disclaimer. My comments on this podcast are for entertainment purposes only and should not be considered, used, or interpreted as legal advice in any way, shape, or form. My comments are solely my opinion and are not the opinion or meant to represent the opinion of my employers, past, present, or future. Thank you.
Well, that's a weird way to answer the phone, but hello.
Hi, guys.
Thanks for picking up the phone here, because we've got a conundrum here. We're, of course, talking about Columbo, and we're trying to decide what is going to happen with this particular case. And Adrian and I really can't agree on this one. We're pretty far apart on this one here.
This has been the farthest apart I think we've ever been, and I'm actually stunned that we've arrived here, because I don't even understand how you think this would hold up in court, and I'm sure you feel the same way about me thinking that this will get immediately thrown out of court.
Yeah, I think that there is she had some good explanations along the way, but I still think that when you put it all together, that this is a problem for her. So let's now turn it over to Judy here. What do you think?
Well, I'm not sure specifically what you're talking about, because there was a lot going on here. I will say that when looking at the totality of the circumstances regarding this case, there are a lot of things I loved, but then it kind of went sideways. For instance, I think the idea of the light bulb was compelling, where we have a woman who never, ever never in a million years would be changing a light bulb herself. And the unmitigated audacity for Columbo to suggest that she did, when in fact we know she did, is a great idea. And that is a brilliant thing to look at, and something great that you would want to normally get into court, and you could tee it up beautifully as a prosecutor, even though she used a very fancy scarf to do that. She wasn't wearing gloves. She wasn't wearing any kind of things to protect her hands. And I think we all know, if we've taken a light bulb out of a package, that you touch it everywhere. I mean, you don't just sort of do these things in, isolated. And then for her to get up on that little step stool and grab the thing and put it in, I think that would have been awesome, except for the fact that then Columbo goes and grabs it out of the light and gives it back to her. So I don't know. I mean, immediately the chain of custody is broken there. There's no way that a television judge would let that come into evidence at all. So it went from this brilliant idea where it was really very compelling, because you could have gotten character witnesses and just ask them, you could have asked Charles, hey, has she ever screwed in a light bulb before? Have you ever seen her use the step stool? It would have been a beautiful circumstantial argument, and he just gave it to her. So I think like that, in my mind, would likely not come in, right? Her prints would have been on the bulb, because we all know when you take things out of a package, you carelessly touch it. There was a very famous Monk episode where a woman was very careful, but she actually took the batteries out of the package and put them into the murder apparatus. And that is how Monk caught her, by checking the batteries, because she only wiped off the apparatus and not the batteries. So those are the things that I was thinking as I was delightfully watching the show. And then I just think that Columbo ruined effectively the chain of custody when he removed the bulb from the fixture and brought it to her office and gave it to her. So that's not going to work.
Just to present the case for Columbo very briefly, we don't know that he didn't first stop off at the lab and find out that there was no dust and no fingerprints because they'd been wiped off, and then went to her office. But fair enough. I'll let you continue.
Do you know what we do know?
What's that?
Do know that none of this should be happening, because he's investigating a non-crime because the coroner's inquest declared it such. So I'm just gonna, you guys can talk about fingerprints and light bulbs and step ladders, and I'll hear you out. I'm here to say that I think she could probably save time and money and just go straight to get a restraining order against Columbo and file a harassment charge.
Well, she could have done that early on, but when she didn't, I mean, he's not going to be unscrewing light bulbs without a warrant for that light bulb. He's not going to be making keys to her house to walk into her bedroom and risk getting shot in the face without a warrant. So
Listen,
I think you have to assume.
He's willy-nilly stuffing potatoes into tailpipes. You don't know what Lieutenant Columbo is capable of.
We're not sure he did that. Although, yes, he absolutely did that. But
I'm sorry. Are we under the presumption that we're assuming warrants?
Yes.
Because
riches.
Are we going to just assume a warrant? Okay. If we're assuming warrants, I still have that chain of custody concern, because you can't walk around with evidence, give it to the suspect, and let her smash it.
Well,
that's not going to work.
That is true. He would have to go in with a warrant and then pick up all the individual pieces of the broken light bulb, which now have her prints on it, because he literally, and his fingerprints for that matter.
And although he is Columbo, he isn't Monk, so he will not be dusting every single shard of glass for a fingerprint. So here's what I think. Ready? Every little thing, because Columbo's all about the little things. Every little thing. And they were considerable in this episode. I grant you that, Rich, for sure. But every little thing, she had a quick and reasonable answer that was not an excuse like my dog ate my homework. Every answer she had was certainly feasible. The most damning thing was, I guess, the testimony from gorgeous Peter Hamilton, a.k.a. a very handsome Leslie Nielsen.
Yes.
But again, that's witness testimony, and it's really just, I think I heard it this way, then I think it heard it this way. He's got a newspaper that I think could be really, it just moved in the house. There was a lot of people in the house that night, and she doesn't know what she grabbed and what she didn't grab. She was admittedly at the front door to answer Peter coming into the house, so she could have grabbed it then and dropped it off at the front door then. I think that, honestly, there's zilch. I think there's actually zilch here.
I don't know how things are done in your neighborhood, but in mine, we don't have phantom newspapers that just materialize in thin air. And they also don't miraculously move from one end of the house to the other while literally stepping over your brother's dead body. But let's get back to Judy's opinion on this here.
Yeah, I'll jump in and comment on the newspaper. I actually will have to agree with Rich on this one. You absolutely can. Everything like that is very significant. There's no doubt in my mind that Columbo could collect the newspaper, have it marked as evidence, and get it admitted into trial evidence. So there's no doubt in my mind that that's an easy thing to mark as evidence, get admitted. It would be really hard for the defense to stop that from coming in. And likely, just based on how trials work, it would likely be an agreed upon or stipulated piece of evidence that perhaps would come in, because I think that anyone could substantiate what that was. I think a more interesting thing to talk about is the very handsome Leslie Nielsen, because as I was watching this show, I really thought, well, this is a really sympathetic woman, and she played it really well. And then when she flipped, I was like, ooh, that's not going to work. So I agree with Adrian that a big part of the evidence that would come in would be, witness and character testimony. And at that point, you really think, well, which is the most likable person that this jury is going to see? Leslie Nielsen is extremely likable. Yeah. He is handsome, and he is confident, and he is deliberate and precise.
Surely you're not going to say that his testimony is impeachable.
Don't call me Shirley.
The only thing that could possibly interrupt or interfere with anything Leslie Nielsen said, which I just think a jury would adore him, especially if he came in wearing those glasses, which were extreme. The only thing that anyone from the defense could possibly say to him is they could cross-examine him on the coroner's inquest, because it wasn't flushed out in the coroner's inquest. Remember, Columbo was reading it at the bar. So that is the only thing that I could see that could interrupt Leslie Nielsen's credibility and testimony. And I still think a jury would accept that. I think that's really hard evidence against her. So that's really damaging. And I think it absolutely would come in.
Okay, wait, let's do that. Ready? Rich, you be Leslie Nielsen, and you flip-flop, and I'm going to interrogate you, and then Judy, you tell us how it goes. Ready?
Okay. I'll be the judge.
Okay, so now we're at the... Okay, now I'm not an attorney, so just get ready. So, as I understand it, at the coroner's inquest, you stated that you heard the alarm and then the gunshot. Yet here we are today, and you're saying the complete opposite. When was it true? Today or there? Or do you just make a habit of lying?
Well, I never said at the inquest that I heard the alarm first and then the gunshot. I said I heard the alarm and I heard the gunshot, but there was no mention of the order in which it was heard.
I don't like when you guys hang up on me. Sorry. It's my whole life, everybody.
Well, look, just because you were always wrong is nothing to be worried about.
Yes, I agree. And I think that it would go, again, you ask a jury to look at the quality of the testimony. So you're going to have, again, they dressed her brilliantly in court. This is why I love this show, because I was like, ooh, I would steal that as an attorney. They dressed her brilliantly in court. They treated her brilliantly. She came across very well. So you'll have her with him. And of course, the backstory as a defense attorney would be to really highlight that he jilted her, or she jilted him, or it's sour grapes, or I don't even know, maybe he killed him. I don't know. So it's an interesting situation, because you do call into controversy now. The whole coroner inquest was seemingly ignored in Columbo's mind. So it's just an interesting thing to think about. But I think Leslie Nielsen would come across very well to a very wealthy community in the 70s. I think he would come across very well. And I think that would be a really hard burden for her to overcome. Having said that, it is all circumstantial.
So what do we have? We have a newspaper, we have a light bulb, we have grass clippings, and I think the most damning is his testimony.
Right.
But to me, I think you can get rid of the newspaper, the grass clippings, and the light bulb. The newspaper, I really do think her brother was in the house. He wasn't shot outside of the house. So if you brought the paper in the house and she was panicked about everything, I think that can be easily explainable. It's really just found by the front door. That's really all that happened. So it's in the house. It's just, and she could say the brother brought it in. It's just found by the front door instead of by his person. And I think that a testimony, I mean, I think he is a credible witness, but maybe he's only saying that because I think that you could make the argument that he was the one that killed him. I think they could kind of turn on each other. Because honestly, and Rich and I did talk about this earlier, Judy, is that I didn't really get a handle on why Columbo never suspected Peter, because they would have been a perfect team to want to murder Bryce.
Well, he's just so handsome, Adrian. I mean, he doesn't have to kill people because he just is handsome. I mean, it's the 70s. Like,
okay.
And I think one big thing that we're really overlooking in this conversation is the fact that a coroner, a state body, has found that it was an accidental death. What did they do? A finding of no responsibility against her? Is that what it would be? I
think it was death by accidental means.
All right.
Okay. So the mechanism of death was the shooting, and then it was death by accidental means. So whatever, and I don't practice in California. I'm not a criminal attorney, but whatever strength that has, I mean, surely that would come in and go to a jury as well.
Well, don't call us Shirley.
I think you have. Okay. So, it's interesting because I agree with Adrian in the sense that I don't think grass clippings matter. I see your point about the paper for sure. You can make arguments on both sides. So maybe that's a push evidence-wise. The light bulb, she smashed. So I don't know. Now, if we're talking about what comes in or what doesn't come in, you're looking at the quality of one witness, and is that enough for a jury to say she had intent to kill this person beyond a reasonable doubt, even just ignoring the coroner? So, I was just going to say that's essentially what you're looking at.
Now, does it get taken into account at all that she pulled a gun on a lieutenant of the homicide division with intent to kill him until he said she's a classy lady, and then she smiled and put it away? Does that enter into it, that she basically was going to shoot Columbo in the face, knowing full well that he was a lieutenant?
Well, this goes back to my question about the warrant, because if someone walks into your home with a key he had someone make without a warrant, obviously none of that's coming in, and the jury would never hear it. So there are often times when there is stuff that happens and it doesn't get to a jury ultimately, right? So who's to say? I mean, if that came in, yes, it's not great that she pulled a gun on Columbo. That's not great. However, it's also not great that Columbo terrorized her by knocking on a window and then entered her home, came in while she was in her bedclothes without announcing his appearance or his arrival, and just came in. So I don't do criminal law. I don't work in California, but surely there are some rules regarding that, I would think.
Don't call us Shirley.
I will stop.
So here's my whole thing with that. I would think that would be a separate charge. And I also think that you can make an argument, and I'm not an attorney, clearly. I fell apart in the stand interrogating somebody, and I fell apart in the stand. But what I do want to say is that I think an argument could be made that he drove her to that point. She was already fragile. I mean, again, for all the reasons that Judy just said, he did do a B&E. For all you people out there, layman's terms, that's a breaking and entering. And so he did do but he entered her home, and he really did harass her completely. So my question, I guess, would really be, could you hitch this entire case on testimony of one man who has a motive to kill Bryce? And just because we know the backstory that he didn't like her wearing a purple crop top one day, it doesn't mean that didn't happen. I mean, as far as everybody else knows, he would have had a motive to kill Bryce, because look what happened after Bryce was killed. He was promoted and he's getting married to her. So he's now assuming all of her inherited wealth. So I think he, although impressive and perhaps more impressive than even her on the stand, is also, he's got a real strong motive to want Bryce gone. So I think you have his testimony, which I think a decent attorney could poke holes in. And I think anything that Columbo did after the coroner's inquest, we don't know the issue of the warrant. We really don't. I don't know if they would issue a warrant for a case that wasn't open.
That's what's so troubling with this. The fact that it's been resolved. You don't get to just sort of not like what a jury or a judge says and go back and say, hey, I'm just going to keep at it, because that's like the double jeopardy, right? You can't keep doing things to satisfy what you think is right. It's, you present your case, you get your decision, you respect the jury, or you appeal something. So I find all of that very interesting. What I did want to bring up and actually see what you guys thought about this, there is no doubt in my mind that Bryce's letter could possibly come into evidence, because that's what put Leslie Nielsen on site, right? So if we're pretending the coroner has no impact for this case in particular, we now have Leslie Nielsen getting this, I'm going to call it borderline threatening, definitely bullying letter, overstepping at the very least, threatening. I mean, Leslie Nielsen says to Columbo when they're eating hamburgers, it was threatening my career. So that's compelling, right? So there's no doubt in my mind that could come in. And if I had a letter like that and had gone over to my girlfriend's house, I think that I would be very worried if someone was looking for who murdered Bryce. It's a bad look.
I agree, but do you think that he would actually have held on to that letter after the guy was shot to death in somebody's house?
If he didn't, there might be some sort of charge, because if there's this thing called spoliation, right? So if there's a lawsuit and there's a presumption that something may or may not be important to that lawsuit, you're supposed to hang on to it. You're not supposed to just it. Now, that's for civil. I don't know what the criminal impact that would be, but it would be almost worse. It's sort of like a lose-lose for Leslie. It would be almost worse for Columbo to say, hey, you got this letter, right? Beth defense counsel surely would know that Leslie got that letter because Beth knew about it. And they could make mincemeat out of him either way by saying, hey, where's the letter? Oh, I shredded it. Oh, you shredded this letter? That's not a good look. So it's sort of one of those moments when you have a case and you're like, this is not, who knows what's going to happen with this. The decisions that lawyers make as they go along, you sort of cringe and make your decision and move on, because again, as Leslie Nielsen, I might be a little bit nervous if I received a letter, raced over there, pulled up to the gate, hopped over the fence, raced inside, and then I'm saying, oh, well, there was a shot and an alarm and a shot. So it gets murky. It gets murky depending on what we're assuming a jury would hear regarding who even shot Bryce. Like, she has to overcome the admission that she shot him.
Right.
But presuming that she's now putting up a full defense with a new set of ears and that admission is not going to come in, let's just say, it's anyone's game. Interesting, right?
It is definitely interesting. I am going to interpret everything you said as you agreeing with me, and I'm right.
Okay.
That's so funny. You're welcome. Thank you for coming to my side, both of you, and supporting all of my evidence.
Good job, Amy.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know. Did you have anything else that you wanted to say on the matter, Judy?
No, I found this thoroughly enjoyable. I absolutely love fake law talking about television. And thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you very much for being here with us. And Addie and I are going to beat each other up for a little bit longer. And thank you. We appreciate the fake legal advice from 50 years ago.
Thank you, counselor.
That would be great. You're very welcome. I guess we're adjourned.
All right. And so now we come to the part of the program where we rate our killer on a sympathy meter from Ruth Gordon, who a most sympathetic killer, to Dick Van Dyke, the least sympathetic and most vicious killer.
I have this dream, Francis. I'm working. There's a phone call, and he says, terribly sorry, but your wife's dead. And then I always wake up, and I want to cry, because you're still alive.
I'm a little torn on this
Okay.
one. I would tend to put her pretty close to Ruth Gordon, because I think that had anyone given her a hug her entire life, she wouldn't even be a killer. But boy, was she so gleefully waiting for her brother to walk through that door. Like she was practically rubbing her hands together.
Yes.
She was having the look on her face of serenity when she was having that daydream about how the killing was supposed to go, and how she was just so happy to shoot him. So I still think I'm going to probably put her at a little less than 1/4 from Ruth Gordon.
Okay, I agree completely with you this time around.
Okay.
I think that I think it's twofold. I think she's a sympathetic murderer. I think killing an unsympathetic victim.
Right.
So I don't feel bad that he's dead. You know, I mean, like in the callous world of Columbo, obviously.
Of course, yes.
But I don't feel bad that he's dead. And I get it. Let me just put it this.
Yeah.
I get it. Like if I showed up at her trial, I'd wear a shirt that's like, I get it. You know, Team Beth, because everyone's awful to her. And literally she melted with just glee when Columbo called her classy one time. So she's so starved for any sort of positive reinforcement or compliment that I really think that I would put her very close to Ruth Gordon. I think she's a sympathetic person surrounded by unsympathetic people. So it's like the opposite of what we usually see with Columbo.
That's right.
So I would put her pretty close to Ruth Gordon. I'd put her maybe in like the 15% sliding scale, you know, on that end. Certainly more sympathetic than not.
Yeah, I certainly obviously agree. I mean, her mother's reaction to her as far as she knew, accidentally killing her brother was not to try and make her feel better for having such a horrible experience and the guilt that she would have been feeling. Her response was to slap her in the face, say you're always useless, and of course you would have accidentally killed my son.
It really was like, I'm stuck with you, you know. So I liked her. I liked her transformation.
Yeah,
I don't know.
fun. It
sort of had like a sexual revolution 1970s vibe to it anyway. They were awful to her. It's a good motive where it's a lifetime of just being stifled to the point now where she has a guy who does I think legitimately love her. I think Peter did legitimately love her, and he's
agree.
now ending. Peter wasn't going to let that end his relationship. He was going to pick Beth. If you remember, he said that he was going to pick Beth and leave the agency,
the company
if needed. But she didn't know that, and I think she was insecure about that, because why wouldn't you be when you're just put down your entire life?
That's right.
I'm pretty sympathetic towards her. Having said that, she did point a gun at Columbo. She's pretty callous, and she was delighted to pull that trigger on Bryce.
Yeah. That's why I kind of put her more toward the 1/4 mark, but 15% to 25%, I think we can live in the difference a little bit there. So I guess the only thing left to do at this point is to say thank you for listening to Rumpled Trench Coat.
One more thing.
Oh, yes. What's that?
I wanted to talk about the actress who played Beth.
Okay.
Her name is Susan Clark, and I don't know if you knew this, but she was the mom on Webster.
I did not know that.
So she had a pretty nice little career before. Her career was really sort of blossoming right around this time. She was in a movie. She was in a movie after this. This was a nice role for her. But I know her from Webster, where there was just a whole bunch of TV shows in the 80s about orphans. And so Webster got compared a lot to Different Strokes.
Sure.
Where
because it was the same show.
It was essentially the same show. I actually had to look up the difference. And so my source material is from Wikipedia, but really it's all from my brain from being a child in the 80s because I watched all of these shows. And so Different Strokes, Mr. Drummond adopts those kids because his housekeeper dies. So he takes in those kids. That's how he gets those boys.
Right.
And then in Webster, the father is a football player with Webster's father. So they're like friends, and so then they actually were his guardian, I guess, or when you name somebody to. So that's like a little bit
his godfather,
like his god, they adopted Webster. And then there was this other great show about orphans, which just makes me so laugh because it's always like a rich person adopting like these impoverished children. Do you remember this show? It was called Rags to Riches.
I remember the title, and I remember some of the opening theme song, but what was the show?
Oh, man, this show was probably my favorite of the three, and it was the least successful of the orphan adoption craze of the 1980s. But Joe Bologna was like playboy gazillionaire from Jersey, because I guess he can't drop that accent.
Right.
And he, just for like optics and to clean up his image a little bit, adopted 6 girls. And so unlike Different Strokes and Webster's, which had a real serious dramatic element to it and were good shows in their own right, Rags to Riches was my favorite because there was always singing and dancing.
Right.
Eventually the girls formed some sort of like girls group. There was always like doo-wop singing and everything. But so Joe Bologna adopted 6 girls, but that just Susan Clark being the mom from Webster took me down the rabbit hole of just remembering all of these like the 80s
silver spoons and
it's just some rich guy adopting, it's just some kid hitting it big, you know, it's just some kid hitting the jack. Annie was like my all-time favorite movie,
of course.
Oh my god, with Carol Burnett, and oh my god, so it was right in my wheelhouse. And when I found out she was the mom from Webster, I'm like, hey. And Susan Clark was actually married in real life to the dad on Webster. He was a real football player in real life.
I knew he was a real football player because he acted on the show like a football player on the TV show. And which I thought was a shame because she's an excellent actress, but she basically had to say her lines against a wooden puppet. But I didn't realize she was actually married to him. So
they were married in real life. Yeah, but she still acts to this day. She just did a play just like a handful of years ago in Canada, so she's still acting. And
oh, that's great. I mean, look, she was fantastic in this episode. Oh yeah, obviously.
Yeah. So that was just one thing I wanted to add. But I'm so excited because this was a great episode and we got to hear that doorbell 1,000 times. Now I'm always on the lookout for that doorbell. And I guess, I'm not sure which the next episode we're going to look at, but I wonder if there's going to be a doorbell in that.
The next episode that we're going to do is Short Fuse, one of my favorites.
Okay.
With Roddy McDowell. And I don't know, we're going to have to look out for the doorbell on that. There may not be an opportunity for it, but, it tends to show up.
It shows up. All right, great. So, you know what, everybody, we will check in next time to talk about Roddy McDowell in Short Fuse. I'm so excited.
One more thing.
Oh, what a surprise, yes.
So let's take a moment to talk about that cab driver that drops off the lady.
Okay.
Because his name is Fred Draper.
Okay.
And he was uncredited in this episode, but he was the taxi cab driver. And you could see they gave him a little more to do. It was just kind of a little bit of a give and take with Columbo. Mm-hmm. But he was actually in 6 episodes of Columbo, never the same character twice.
Oh.
So he was one of the recurring character actors on it. So it was Fred Draper. He was in Lovely But Lethal.
Okay.
He's in Negative Reaction, A Deadly State of Mind, Last Salute to the Commodore as the murderer.
Oh, really?
And Fade into Murder. Yes. Yes.
That's amazing.
Now we'll get to the Last Salute to the Commodore eventually when we get down to that episode, but it was a great fake out because it was the only episode of Columbo where you didn't see the killing happen. You only thought you did. So this
Yes,
character,
I know this episode now. Sorry, go ahead. Yes,
that's
okay.
all right.
Okay.
Tisn't. So you know what? I'll even stop because I'm going to go into it in more detail when we do that episode, and that's a good tease. But the fact is that he was a little like he played a lab technician here, a little there, just never the same character twice, but the same actor, and then he actually got to be the murderer in one. So that was pretty cool. That was a lot of fun.
So now, how did you even recognize him?
I just recognize him.
Oh, okay.
You watch enough episodes, and I tend to be a lot better with faces than names, so I had to look up his name, but the face and the voice I just know is him, you know.
That's so cool.
But there's another one that we'll be talking about. Vince Scotti is a character actor we'll be talking about in other episodes, who also shows up. Dad would joke that he was in more episodes of Columbo than Peter Falk, just because he showed up so much.
That name sounds familiar, I have to say.
Yeah.
Oh, man. That's great.
Thank you for listening to Rumpled Trenchcoat Columbo podcast, everybody. I'm Rich Nocella.
I'm Adrian Nocella, and I'm also especially thanking my brother for always blindly supporting me so I didn't have to steal his keychain and murder him, because he's a phenomenal brother.
Well, I appreciate not getting tricked into getting shot 3 times in the chest. So
you're welcome.
And thanks to our special guest, Judy.
Thanks, Jude.
So please follow us on Twitter at RumpledT and on Instagram at Rumpled Trenchcoat, all one word. Mm-hmm. And on Patreon at Richard Nocella is Creating Rumpled Trenchcoat. So all that's left to say is thank you for listening. Join us next episode when we talk about Short Fuse with Roddy McDowell. And until then, keep your feet on the ground and your head in the rumpled trenchcoat.
Why does that even mean? Why would your head be in a trench coat? This is just... We gotta do it.
Not good? Not a good one?
So not... Get Judy back on the phone. I want her to hear what you just said. This is outrageous.
No.
Goodness.
No. All right. Well, thank you. Thanks for listening, everybody. See you next time. Goodbye.